Joining us now is Doug Eldridge, a nationally recognized public relations advisor and agent who has represented dozens of athletes. He is also the founder of DLE Agency and Achilles PR. Doug, welcome back. Good to be with you. As we just mentioned, Speaker Pelosi is suggesting a diplomatic boycott. What exactly does that mean, and what type of impact would that have on the Beijing Games?
First of all, great question. Right out of the gate, let's distinguish and delineate between a complete and total boycott and a diplomatic boycott. In 1980, the United States boycotted the Moscow Olympics. The Soviet Union didn't move the needle. The only losers, if you can call it that, in that scenario were the American athletes. By contrast, a diplomatic boycott is simply nothing more than key heads of state, be it presidential cabinet members or even the White House themselves, much less congressional leaders like Speaker Pelosi, not making the trip over to China. So really, it's the difference between a shotgun and a BB gun. Both are rifles, but only one is a weapon. So in the context of a diplomatic boycott, it's really a toothless, feckless maneuver by Congress.
Doug, what do you think will happen? I mean, do you think the U.S. and other countries will end up boycotting the Beijing Games, or do you think it's possible the Winter Olympics could be moved to a different country if there's enough international support?
You know, those are two different questions. And I think you also have to kind of put it in context. Over the last 14 months, I think we've all realized that never say never and never say always, right? Anything is possible, no matter how seemingly remote. That being said, the notion of moving the Winter Olympics is as close to impossible as you can probably get. Let's look at 2014 in Sochi. That cost $55 billion. Now, granted, that was tantamount to establishing the Winter Olympics in the Outer Banks in North Carolina. Sochi is a sleepy beachside village resort in Russia. They had no infrastructure, no housing, no hotels, no highways, nothing. For Pyeongchang, Korea, it was $13 billion. So the notion of 9 months out just moving Beijing, that's prohibitive. The probability is as close to zero as you can get. For a boycott, I think we're going to see it on the diplomatic side, but a complete and total boycott, no. There's too many losers on the American corporate side. And again, the optics of punishing U.S. athletes for something they had nothing to do with is problematic in of itself. So I think each is merely a talking point and something that can be tweeted by their respective press secretaries. I don't think we're going to see traction, actionable traction, on either front.
You know, you had mentioned the athletes before. I want to talk about that a little more. You know, most of them have trained their entire lives for this moment. What are they saying about the situation, and what would happen to them and their Olympic dreams if a boycott were to happen?
And, you know, that's really the question that we should probably lead with, because in so many ways, they are the people who are left holding the bag or left by the side of the road, if you will, altogether. Right? This isn't Tom Brady reloading, relaunching, and rebuilding toward another campaign the next year. Olympic athletes train their entire lives for the opportunity to compete every 4 years, but in reality, once in a lifetime. Now, I've had the privilege, as I should have said from the outset, to work both here on Capitol Hill, where my office is, advising leaders of Congress, do brand advisement, and obviously athlete representation. So I have a unique perspective, really the proverbial 50,000-foot view on all of this. And really the only losers are the athletes themselves. Now, it is kind of a convoluted question because we live in a unique time where athletes are taking a far more active and far more vocal role in political and social issues, right? 35 years ago, Michael Jordan famously said, "Why should I weigh in on politics? Republicans buy shoes too." In 2021, you're seeing an interesting parlay with the likes of LeBron James. He said, "Why should I weigh in? The Chinese government and the entire country itself buys not only shoes, but they're a massive consumer. I've got a Space Jam movie coming out. I've got this, I've got that." So certain athletes will weigh in on domestic issues, but they're reticent because they have to be cognizant of their brand, both domestic and abroad. And I advise my clients, whether it's visiting the White House, of course, that's the people's house. It doesn't matter whether or not you voted for the sitting president. That's the people's house, and this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In that same vein, be cognizant of where you stand and how you speak in the context of geopolitical instability. And all of that boils down to this. At the end of the day, they represent their home, their family, their street, their town, and their country at large. For Team USA athletes, this is the lifetime honor. They don't wear a logo or a badge. They literally wear the symbol of our country, much like my father's flag that hangs behind me here in my office. So there's different considerations, and the scales are balanced differently when we talk about the Olympics, competing on the largest stage in global sports. So my hope is that ultimately those who are benefited let the chips fall where they may. At a minimum, let's ensure that those who aren't burdened or hurt are the athletes who have sacrificed and trained and challenged their entire lives just to get to the precipice of doing the best they possibly could for their country. Those are the ones that we should be rooting for.
All right, Doug, sorry, we have to leave it right there. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate your analysis.
Thank you for having me.